Hello, I'm the Game Professor, and welcome to Games as Lit 101. Obviously, this show is specifically about storytelling in video games, but that doesn't mean I only play video games for the story. I've dabbled in game design, I play games with friends, and I get addicted to really fun multiplayer games just like everyone else. So today, we're going to be counting down my top 10 favorite games with minimal story. There are, of course, a few rules. First, the basic one game per series rule, otherwise there might be multiple spots taken up by Mario or something. Second, backstory doesn't count. Games like Overwatch may have interesting lore, but there's no story in the game itself, so for the purposes of this list, it's counted as having minimal story. And finally, roguelikes and similar games meant to randomly generate narrative experiences don't really count, and that's kind of a subjective one. For instance, I'd say a game like Civilization may have minimal narrative elements, but I still largely enjoy it because of the emergent narrative that it actively fosters, and the whole point of this list is to point out games that I love for reasons other than that. And of course, as always, this list is entirely based on my own opinion and the amount of fun that I have had with these games. So feel free to agree or disagree in the comments, and let's just dive right into my favorite 10 games with little to no story. Number 10, Star Wars. If you haven't played this one, you are missing out on some fun. It's just some random game made by some random people and released to little attention short of some achievement hunter streams, but it's some of the most fun you will ever have with your friends. You play as narwhals in space, trying to stab each other's hearts with your horns. Super simple premise, but combined with the intentionally slippery controls, it simultaneously becomes hilariously chaotic and seriously intense. I've played this with friends for hours on end, and I'm sure I'll be doing it again sometime. Number 9. Puzzle Quest: Challenge of the Warlords. This was the first Puzzle Quest game, and while it technically has a story told in visual novel-style sequences between some levels, it really just does come down to kill the evil monsters that are invading our lands, and obviously it wasn't a focal point of the game's development. The game basically takes a match 3 system, similar to Bejeweled, and turns it into a battle system. It's been done plenty now, but back when this game came out it was a relatively novel concept, and Puzzle Quest pulls it off splendidly. You take turns with your enemy, matching skulls to do damage, stars to gain experience, coins to make some extra gold, or one of 4 color gems to gain mana in that color. You have different spells and abilities that take various colors and amounts of mana to use, and each one offers different kinds of strategic options. You also have different classes that utilize different colors and different amounts. The strategic depth of this game is impressive for how simple the match 3 concept is, and I was playing it long after I had completed the basic story. Number 8. Super Mario Sunshine. This one's kind of a stretch, I admit, because of the main line of Mario games it has possibly the most narrative effort next to Galaxy, but it's still very simple, and frankly, it's my favorite of the main Mario games, so it made the most sense to pick it from the series. It's kind of a weird one as Mario games go, and many felt that the change of scenery in addition to water mechanics with FLUDD was too much, but I still just really love this game. It's not as pretty as Galaxy, but it retains more of the challenge that kept me coming back to see everything it had to offer, and the sheer variety of the mission structure is impressive considering how many of the levels take place in the same locations. The story is there, but it's ultimately a Mario game, and I love it for the excellent platforming and creative challenges. Number 7. One Finger Death Punch. This game is way more fun than it probably has a right to be, and it's proof positive that you can create a challenging and compelling game with a ridiculously simple interface. It's a side-scrolling beat-em-up where you only use the right and left mouse buttons to attack in their corresponding directions. You can only attack once enemies are in range, so you can't mash the buttons or you'll miss and likely take some damage. This is one of the best examples I can think of how one can create a compelling, challenging, skill-based game with even the most simple of gameplay mechanics, and it's the kind of addicting game that has wasted dangerous amounts of my time before I even realized it. I cannot get enough of this one. Number 6. Crash Bandicoot 2: Cortex Strikes Back. This one is largely nostalgic, I'll admit, but I really do love it. I mentioned it in the list of games that changed my life because it was the first game I ever really fell in love with. I first played Crash 2 at a friend's house after he got this weird new PlayStation system that I was just annoyed wasn't a Nintendo 64. But even though he always wanted to play Tony Hawk and Gran Turismo, Crash Bandicoot 2 completely stole my attention. And when I got a PlayStation of my own, it was one of my first purchases. The third game is probably better overall, but so much of my childhood is invested into the second game, the first game I ever loved, that I can't keep this one from being my favorite. It's so ingrained in my mind, I got 100% completion on the remaster in a matter of hours, all from memory. It's quirky, it's fun, and it's one of the main reasons I'm here doing this in the first place. Number 5. Splatoon. This game got plenty of well-deserved praise, but even so, I feel like it doesn't get nearly as much love as it deserves. Not only did Nintendo manage to create a thoroughly entertaining online shooter, but they made it refreshingly unique and entirely appropriate for all ages. That's quite an accomplishment. But also overlooked is the single-player mode, which might be one of my favorite Nintendo adventures to date. It uses the basic mechanics of the game alongside a variety of interesting items and challenges made just for that single-player mode, and it culminates in what has to be one of my, if not my absolute favorite boss fight in any Nintendo game ever. Rigorously testing your mastery of the mechanics with a challenging, but not frustratingly so, encounter along to some seriously awesome music. The second game is just as good, but the first one got an edge on it in my book because nothing tops that DJ Octavio fight in the first game. Whether you're playing alone or online, Splatoon is just so impressively creative and enjoyable, I can't help but love it. Number 4. Overwatch. This game became immensely popular before it was even released due to a colorful and varied cast of characters, and thankfully, the game itself lived up to the high expectations set for it. Overwatch is a supremely well-implemented hero shooter with a whole lot of variety in playstyle and some great support on Blizzard's part as they continue to constantly update the game to keep it balanced, add free new characters, maps, and game types, and create events with all kinds of unique ways to play and special loot to unlock. Overwatch does have a story, sort of, but all the actual narrative elements are packed into comics and some excellent animated shorts. The game itself is just a bunch of multiplayer matches that don't even bother to line characters up depending on which side of the conflict they're in the story, so the game itself has infuriatingly little actual narrative content, but it's still a blast to play. Number 3. Rocket League. It's so simple, so absurd, but it controls so tightly and the simplicity ensures balance. It's just a perfect competitive game, and I've never played a multiplayer game that had me on the edge of my seat as often as this one. For that matter, I've never played anything resembling a sports game that held my interest for more than an hour or so, let alone consumed my social gaming like this one did for a while after its release. It's been making quite a splash in competitive gaming circles too, because its simple mechanics and frantic competitive spirit make it the perfect game for a test of skill against other people. This is one of those I can see myself coming back to for years. Number 2. Super Smash Bros. I'll go with the Wii U version here because I do think it's the best one, but Melee was the one I fell in love with as a kid. There's just so much going for this series. It's the perfect embodiment of easy to learn and difficult to master. It's impressively well balanced considering the diversity of its huge roster of characters. It's basically Nintendo fanboy crossover heaven, and it can provide more hours of fun at parties than most anything else out there. My wife and I had a first game of Smash Brothers at our wedding instead of a first dance. That's how much I enjoy this game, and also how much we didn't want to dance at our wedding. I probably have more hours of social gaming logged into this series than any other game out there, and for good reason. It's just that much fun. And finally, my number 1 favorite video game with no story is Minecraft. This one almost broke the emergent narrative rule, but it's ultimately more about creativity than stories, and it doesn't intentionally encourage emergent narratives so much as just lets you loose on the world to see what happens. There's nothing I can say about this game that hasn't already been said. The procedurally generated worlds leave unlimited amounts of new things to discover, the versatility of collection and building allows you to do basically anything you want, the multiplayer component is similarly versatile and can provide some great fun. When it comes down to it, I just love finding new and exciting landscapes. I love creating homes and fortresses any way I want. I love exploring a dark, complex cave system, crawling with monsters in hopes of finding some rare materials. And most of all, I love being able to do all that with friends, building a home and working together to thrive in the game's hostile world. It's a unique and groundbreaking game, and even after all these years, I can't get enough of it. So those are my personal top 10 favorite games with little to no story. Feel free to go to the comments whether you agree or disagree, and if you like the video, don't forget to, well, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and check the description to follow Games as Lit 101 on Facebook and Twitter. And if you really like what this show is doing, then head over to Patreon and consider donating. This is currently building up to my upcoming Alan Wake analysis, at which point the show is going to be going back onto a weekly schedule. So stay tuned, and until next time, class dismissed.